name is Leanne Luchka. I'm a pharmacist here in Calgary. I've been a pharmacist for 27 years. And about 5-6 years ago, I really got into digestive health, and where people's core health is really in their gut and microbiomes and such. And so I was kind of hooked after the first time I brewed kombucha. Love the science of it. So we're going to talk a little bit about what kombucha is and what it's good for, and definitely going to show you how you can make it at home so easy that it's almost ridiculous. And yeah, we'll see where it goes from there. Usually I kind of start off with just a feel of the room. So I'm wondering if anybody has never had kombucha, their friend dragged them here, and and they're just being a good sport. Okay. Then generally, how many people have had kombucha? They buy it at the store. They buy it regularly at the store. Yeah. And what kind of brands do you guys normally drink? Turbuch? Like the on tap and the bubbles? Ginger. Like GTs? Yeah. And love the super ginger strong flavor. Any other brands anybody's tried?
No, Farmer's Market makes one.
Yeah, I don't remember who's at that one.
How is it? That's the True.
Oh, Turbuch? Yeah, so there's actually probably half a dozen companies in town now. Happy Belly, the ladies that I share the kitchen with, their wild tea, so they were nice enough to give us some samples tonight. The soda's brand new for them, so you probably haven't seen it before, and it's actually quite yummy. So they went with cola, root beer, cream soda, and orange, just to try as a gateway ferment to get people hooked. Anybody brewing kombucha at home right now? Doing well?
Yeah, I mean,
Learning. You're doing well as well?
Yeah.
Yep, so you're just looking for refreshers?
Well, that's what my daughter said. She said, you're already doing it, Mom. And I said, yeah, you can always learn something.
That's right. Well, that's good. Okay. So we've got the full gamut, so we'll try to do the whole spiel. So kombucha. Kombucha actually is a vinegar. If you leave it sit long enough, it'll turn into a vinegar. It'll taste kind of like apple cider vinegar. And so if something's gone too far, don't worry about it. Don't throw it away. You can use it as salad dressing. You can use it, some people use it as cleaning products and that sort of stuff. I've heard it's good for rinsing out your hair, to get the toxins and the wax and stuff out of your hair. But it is actually a vinegar. The kombucha culture is, they call it a SCOBY because it's a symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast. And so the science behind it is you make the nice sweet tea, the yeast eats the sugar and makes some alcohol. The bacteria eats the alcohol and then makes the cellulose SCOBY that goes on top. And it's always going to grow to the same size as the container you've got. The longer you leave it undisturbed, the thicker it'll get, really dense. And the idea behind that is the bacteria is trying to trap out all the other bacteria and molds that might come into the brew. It's like, this is my house, this is my food, I'm protecting it. Because of the pH level of kombucha, it's super safe. So if you follow the basic ratios, if you follow the basic recipe, it's very hard to go astray. Flavor-wise, everybody's got different flavors. They want it super strong or super sweet, fruity, minty. There's all sorts of choices, and that's what's fun about making it yourself. So tonight, don't worry about taking notes. I don't see too many people. If you go to the website, it's on the card, and you tab down to the bottom, join the newsletter, it'll automatically send you the brewing guide. So it's actually 19 pages of everything I could possibly think of, pull it out of my head, in a good spot for a reference for later on. Tea. Sorry, it's been a while since I did the demo. So let's, in the kit, because when I first started out, I wanted to share it with everybody. Who's really excited. And I'm like, here, here's a SCOBY, go off. And everybody's like, yeah, thank you. What is that? And they were afraid, or they humored me, but I don't think very many of those people really did brew on their own. So I tried to take out every step, make it as easy as possible. So the tea, I've pre-measured the tea bag for 1 liter. The sugar's pre-measured. I've added a wooden spoon because you really need to separate your kombucha spoon from everything else, just for bacteria's sakes. So you've got a little tasting straw for when you want to find out if it's ready to go. You've got a China marker so that you can mark on the container when you started it, what flavors of tea you put in it, that sort of thing. Gloves, pH strips, so the science geeks of us want to know that it's safe. This is going to make sure that you know it's safe. It's going to be able to test it at the end so you know that it's done. And then I added in a funnel and a strainer so you can get it into the bottles afterwards. So a little bit of everything. Oh, and the best part is the thermometer. So it's right on the jar, and right now you can see it's kind of 2022 in here. It's just kind of lit up like a mood ring. And that way, one of the things you can do wrong is adding the SCOBY to the tea when the tea's too hot. And that's the one thing that will kill the bacteria and yeast. So it's actually, you make tea, you add the culture, and then you just let it rest. So my trick is I make a liter of tea in my jar, then I add cold water, and it's usually just about the right temperature at that point. Other than you don't have to wait for the tea to cool down.
What kind of tea is it?
The tea I use, let's get it started so it can brew, and then I'll go back to explaining things. So never add boiling water to glass, or you'll soon have two pieces of glass. Easy breezy. So great big tea bag. Let's get it started brewing. So just to back up a bit, we want to brew in glass. That's the easiest way to ensure that you're not going to have a contaminant. It's easy to wash, easy to recycle. You can use food-safe plastic, but that's an industrial kind of thing. You wouldn't want to use your Rubbermaid. You wouldn't want to use the recyclable containers. They're actually, when you look at it real closely, there's pores. And again, you'll get mold, you'll get bacteria. I had one fellow that, in emergency, his jar broke, put it into a plastic, whatever he had around the house, and sure enough, he had mold in like 2 days. And he'd been fine previously. The other option is you can go to stainless steel. Stainless steel versus some spoon you got at the dollar store. I know that's food grade stainless steel. Not sure what the other spoons may be. And then the third option would be a ceramic water crock. It used to be an old thing where a lot of them had lead in them, or they're cracked, and so then they were leaching lead into the kombucha and that sort of stuff. So that's one of the things people talk about is metals leaching into the kombucha. That's what that was from. So when you get the kit, unpack it, give everything a good wash with soapy water. Because it's bacteria and yeast, if there's any soap residue left in there, that could harm the SCOBY. It's an antibacterial, and we're trying to grow bacteria. So rinse it again, and then rinse it again. Some of us now have the nice washing machines, the dishwashers. If it's got a sanitize cycle on it, it'll actually come to the correct temperature for about 5 minutes, and it sanitizes it. So it's really, really kind of handy. And then if you want to take the extra step after that, you take distilled white vinegar and give it a quick swirl around, because the acidic nature will kill anything else that's left. So once you're all clean, we need to talk about water. You don't want to use tap water. Again, our tap water has chlorine in it. and we're trying to make a bacteria. You can usually get away with it maybe one brew. I've had people, they just make a mistake that first time. As long as you're not doing it over and over and over again, it's not getting that exposure to the chlorine. It's also what sort of stuff do you want in your body. I've been using, as long as it's filtered through the carbon filter, so Brita's fine. If you got reverse osmosis, that's fine, but just have to remember that all the minerals are gone out of there. And the tricks with tap water is you can leave it out overnight, and so that'll evaporate the chlorine out of it. Or boil it for 5 minutes, same thing, the evaporation will pull the chlorine out, and that makes it safe for the SCOBY. So kombucha is generally made with a black or green tea. There's certain elements in the official tea, Camellia, that the kombucha needs, that it thrives on. So this, what I use is half green and half black. I use an organic company out of Ottawa. They're Shanty tea. The teas are absolutely beautiful. Every time I open the big bag, I just put my head in there. It's just a beautiful thing. But you can use other teas. Oolong is kind of steeped in between. It's a little bit more expensive than green or black teas, but it is very, very nice as a kombucha. If you want to use herbal teas, so hibiscus, rooibos, any of those sort of things, you can do that. You can do a couple of batches, usually it'll be okay, but over time the SCOBY just kind of gets weak because it's not actually tea, it's a herb. So the trick behind that is to do 1/3 of the herbal tea and 2/3 of black or green tea, depending on the flavor profile you want. So a little bit of hibiscus, a little bit of rooibos, it actually sweetens up the whole brew quite a nice way. So that's a tea. What am I missing on the tea? So generally, if you follow the directions on the tea and you make a good tasty tea, so a lot of them will say, will give you the temperature to brew your tea at and the number of minutes. As long as you do that and the tea tastes good, it'll generally make a good kombucha. The only teas you want to avoid is something with essential oils in it, and the traditional one that is like that is the Earl Grey tea. Makes a great kombucha, but you just don't want to do it over and over and over again. Over time, the bacteria and yeast, they get out of balance, and it's just not a healthy brew. So once you've got a nice tea going, I'm just going to dissolve your sugar. Open up. And again, everything's pre-measured, so you don't have to think about it, don't have to do ratios. And you just want to get it dissolved while it's still warm. So at this point, the kombucha, nothing will be showing up on the jar because it's actually way more than 32 degrees in there. And that's where the trick is. You use cold water. You need to leave some headspace for the SCOBY and the starter fluid. We'll go about there. Let's see. Yeah. So just give it a second for the thermometer to come down. So that leads into sugar. What I use is an organic cane sugar. It's the most refined organic sugar there is. Kombucha will do best with plain old table sugar. It's super refined. It gets in there, it grabs what it needs right away. The SCOBYs are incredibly dense and thick, but we don't really know these days what all they're doing to our sugars, the drying agents, that sort of thing. So that's why I go with an organic, the cane sugar. There are recipes out there for brown sugars, molasses, that sort of thing. You're welcome to try that out, but I really encourage everybody to stick the first 5 or 6 brews to what I know works, and then after you've got an extra SCOBY or 2, you go ahead and have an experiment with a different type of sugar. Some people have had some success with coconut sugar as well. And the other question that I often get with the sugars is, do I have to put sugar? I don't want sugar. I'm trying to eliminate the sugar in my diet. No, it needs sugar. It needs to live. That's all it's getting to eat. It's consuming most of it. So in a finished kombucha, 250 mils has only got about 30 or 50 calories. So really it's processed most of the sugar. It's in a much more digestible state for yourself. So I generally tell people not to worry about the amount of sugar. Brew it that way. If you want less sugar, you can thin it out. You can use less fruit in the second brew. But it's certainly not like having a Coca-Cola. Like a soda pop has got like 150 calories in it. It's just off the charts. Sugar. The other option is honey. So if you want to go with honey, I highly recommend that you use a culture called June. It's a very, very similar to kombucha. Some people say it's just kombucha that you've starved off sugar. But generally the June culture has been grown on a green tea and honey diet. And so the kombucha is much more effervescent, the flavor's much, much lighter. And they call it the champagne of kombucha. So it all depends on where you are in your diet and what you want to accomplish. So the temperature's already coming down. I'm going to add the SCOBY anyway. So you want to wait until the temperature's below 27, just so that you're not harming the SCOBY. And you want to add all the starter fluid. So one of the reasons why kombucha is so hard to screw up is the acidic nature. So the pH needs to be under 4.5 to be food safe. And the starter kombucha is the part that does that for us. And this one is called River. I'm just going to top it up. I don't recommend brewing past the shoulder of the jar. Because if you fill it up here, then the SCOBY forms as this size, and then as it evaporates slowly, then the sides of it are weaker. So just go up to the shoulder just before it starts to get narrow. And so in this case, River's decided she's going to float. That's fine. They can float, they can sink. Sometimes they'll even flip over. And I forgot the most important thing in the kit. They all come with the hand cover. So one of the fun parts is now you've made this lovely yummy kombucha, and then the fruit flies decide that they want some. And a lot of people just say, oh yeah, just use some gauze, don't worry about it. They get in. Even if you fold the cheesecloth 3 or 4 times, they get through one layer, and then they go through the next layer. They got all day to do this. So I have a lady that sews the cloth covers for me. They've got the elastic on, so they're easy to put on and off. In fruit fly season, I say definitely put another elastic band on because they're very devious little creatures. And if you do see them, then I've got lots of tricks on the website on how to set up some traps and prevent them and that sort of thing. Tea, sugar, waiting. So at this point, you want to find a warmer spot in the house. I like brewing at about 24 degrees, but I have seen references that say to brew it like up to 27 degrees for a week. If you brew at a cooler temperature, you're going to get a milder taste. It's going to take longer, and you're at more risk for the mold to form in the brew. 27 degrees, it's going to brew faster, and the taste is going to be more sharp, more acidic. I find that I like my tea kind of mid-range, I like my temperature mid-range, and then from there I go and I flavor it the way I want on the second ferment. So yeah, finding a spot in the house. It's into the winter season, if you're having trouble keeping the house warm, we've got some heaters and stuff on the website. Sometimes it's just making a little thermo box, if you've got a picnic box at home, tucking it in there, even warming up like a hot water bottle, that sort of thing, and popping it in every day or so. Some people put it in their oven with the light on. That's the old way. I'm always afraid that I'm going to turn on that oven preheated and cook everything inside. So I don't recommend that one, but I'm willing to let you try it. So you found a good spot, it's nice and warm. You want to leave it alone for at least a week. After a few days, the new SCOBY is going to form. It's going to just be this really jelly, translucent layer on top. Sometimes you'll see some globs of yeast forming, so brown, kind of snotty looking stuff. So at about day 3, just kind of go in, sneak around any SCOBY that's forming and have a taste, see what it's like. And then everybody's flavors, palates are different. If you like the sour taste, then you're going to want to leave it brewing 2 weeks, maybe even 4 weeks. Some people like it super sour. If you like your sweet, then harvest it when it's more sweet sour to your liking. And again, it'll take 4 or 5 brews till you get to that spot where you know that, okay, day 5 is where I really like it, and that's the day that I want to do second ferment. So once it's ready, you need to save 2 cups of kombucha for your next one, because we want the pH to come down. And then, and the SCOBY, and the baby SCOBY. And generally just keep them together till they're about 1 inch thick together. And at that point you can pull them apart. Save one for emergencies. After you've grown a couple, you can share some with friends. So let's have it.
The baby SCOBY grows right on top of the...
Yep. Yeah, so it's trying to, any exposure to air, it just starts the whole formation. And it'll always be the same size and shape of whatever container it's in. So the pH structure is super easy. It's just a dip system, and then you compare it to the little chart. And so we're at 3.5, which is perfect. Anything under 4.5, and in my kits, everything's got enough starter to get it there right away. So after it's done, a lot of people will flavor in the second ferment. With the combination that I find is a third fruit juice. This is just the easiest way to start. Again, first 4 or 5 batches, there's lots. You can do grape, you can do strawberry, you can do all sorts of things. But if you fill up your jug, third of it, then top it up to the neck of the bottle with kombucha. Seal it tight, because if you like the carbonation, that's the part that does it. Leave it at room temperature for 2-3 days, and then pop it in the fridge. Carbonation, for it to stay in the kombucha, needs to be refrigerated, needs to be cool. So give it a couple hours, 2-3 hours in the fridge, come back, test it. If it's the carbonation you like, put them all in the fridge and you're good to go. Kombucha can be kept in the fridge generally 3 to 6 months, depending on what it is. It is still fermenting while it's in the fridge. So if you leave some out in the garage for 2 years, eventually it's going to burst. It's just how it is. I've been working with the Easy Cap bottles out of Airdrie, and their bottles are thicker. A standard beer bottle will hold 30 psi. Their bottles are rated 100. They'll hold more than 100, but that's all that they're guaranteed to. That was the very, very fast version of that. And again, the China marker is great because you can put the date that you put it together, and you did 1/3 of 2/3 a cup blueberry juice, and then when you come back in 3 days, you remember which one's which. And then you always, when you get a perfect one, you're always trying to recreate it. That was the very quick version. Let's go to questions so that we can fill in the gaps.
If you want to put ginger in, so you would take fresh ginger, would you grate it, or would you just put it in a knob and let it? How would you flavor that?
Yeah, there's so many variations on the ginger. So first, some people like floaties and some people don't, right? So if you don't like solids floating around in your kombucha, like if you juice it or grate it, you're going to get more of that ginger flavor. You're going to get more of the, there's a little bit of sugar in ginger, right? And you want the carbonation. So juice it, shred it, you know, put it through the blender and pop it in. But it's going to leave a pulp in your kombucha. If you don't really like that, then do more like a julienne, make long skinny portions, and then little tiny French fries that they'll come out of the top, but you're getting the most surface area you possibly can. Usually add a little bit of like white grape juice or raisins or just a little bit of something to get a little extra sweetness, so it'll build more carbonation for you.
And with the sugar, can you use the stevia or any of these sugar replacements? Can you use agave syrup instead of honey?
You might be able to find a recipe online. Agave, just it's hard to digest, right? And so we're trying to feed our little friends. Yeah. It'd be an interesting experiment, but I haven't done that one.
So I've been doing kombucha for about 2 years.
Yep.
And with my SCOBY,
Yep.
it looks like it's kind of falling apart. Like it's always been like that.
Okay.
And there's like really concrete layers. It looks ratty, like ragged.
Okay. Everybody can hear her or no? Yep. So you're using the same SCOBY that you started with?
I mean, I've given parts of it away and
Yeah,
stuff like that.
yeah. You can retire it. It's okay.
But is it time for retirement?
Yeah. Eventually they get really, really stained. Like the tea just makes them really dark. They get all soft and globby, and it's okay. You just put it into the compost. It's fine. Save one of your other ones that's gotten nice and thick. If you jiggle it hard, then it usually makes a layer, and then you can usually peel them
But
apart.
it's never really done that. It's just kind of like, I don't know. There's no solid parts of the new SCOBY either. It just,
Oh, okay.
It's just kind of,
Okay, so the cheat. So your brew is actually a little bit too much yeast, so you're probably getting really good bubbles.
yeah.
Yeah. So you need a little bit more bacteria. So the trick is, there's 2 tricks. So you want to take the starter from the top of the container, because there's more bacteria at the top, and then put in a teaspoon of vodka,
Okay.
because that'll give the bacteria a head start on the yeast. The other things you can do is make your tea a little bit weaker, and then again,
I do make it quite weak.
okay. So
What
that's
about adding like some vinegar to it or something?
no, that's not going to help. It's literally you just need a bit more activity at your bacteria. Yeah. So and actually the vodka is probably the easiest, quickest fix for that.
And then so how many times do you think that needs to be done?
Well, you'll be able to tell right away in the next batch. Yeah. And if you're doing a 1 gallon, like a teaspoon is enough. Just enough so they're more active before the yeast gets to the sugar and that sort of stuff. Yeah. Sorry.
I'm just wondering if you could diversify the SCOBY by adding different probiotics to it. If you wanted to do that, get some different probiotic strains.
Yeah, different probiotics. Because I'm a pharmacist, I really like, I gotta add some Saccharomyces in there. It didn't turn out well. It's again, the balance of nature is just the way it goes. A lot of the commercial kombuchas, if you're really particular, you got to ask some questions of who your the brewer is. They had the thing a few years ago where people were getting in trouble because there was too much alcohol in it, and there's alcohol in it. If you add the right fruit juices, you can make it a nice wine out of it. But it's being sold as a non-alcoholic, so there were certain brands that got pulled from the market because they were over their percentages. There's certain people that were drinking it that were supposed to be sober and getting into trouble. And so some of the companies, GT's is one of them, they've actually gone in and they've pulled out certain strains and added certain strains so that they know that they're not making the alcohol. Not everybody's done that. Some people just they pasteurize it and then they add lactobacillus back to it. There's all sorts of different versions. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I find that you get little patches of black and SCOBY.
Mhm.
Is that just mold? Is it arrows?
Um,
Sometimes they just get dark.
Sometimes they'll get dark from the tea. Sometimes do you find you get dry spots and then those get dark?
That's what you guys probably get that dark.
Dark, like not just the snot, the yeasty, gross stuff.
Yeah, some of the sometimes just a little spot, sometimes darker. It always could have
Yeah, it's not like little bits of tea leaves.
that's
No, okay. You can send me some photos. I have no problem taking a look and see. Sometimes it's like, oh yeah, that's what it is. No big deal. Hi,
You talk about the temperature,
temperature.
24-ish.
I like 24.
So can it be in direct sunlight when,
So, okay, so back in the 90s when everybody was doing kombucha, they said put it in the windows.
yeah,
And that was to make sure that it was brewing at a nice temperature. Some people were using really bright windows and they're killing their scobies.
okay.
So the light is fine. You know, it's acidic, so it should fight off most everything. But as my fighting fish will tell you, if you put it in the sunlight for too long, it gets too hot. Anybody else?
Do we have the bottles at all?
If you're using a good bottle, you don't have to worry about it. Some people will use mason jars. It's definitely isn't rated for carbonation. So if you're trying a mason jar, you're going to have to open it every day just so it doesn't shatter on you.
They're okay just to keep sealed
Mhm.
months and months and months and
In the fridge, yeah.
in the fridge.
Yeah. Yeah, eventually, you know, in the fridge, you know, in years kind of thing, eventually it'll build up enough carbonation to,
So you don't have to release it at all, like initially?
no. I always leave a little bit of gap. And I'm trying to, you want all the gases that are created to be forced in and dissolved into the kombucha because you want the carbonation, right? So if you've got a good bottle, not the IKEA ones, the Growlish are okay. There's a lemonade one that I haven't had any issues with.
Lolita?
Lolita, yeah. Yeah. But again, if there's one little spot where the glass is weak, it's going to find it. But yeah, those 2-3 days, just leave it, you know, don't put it in the direct sunlight, but normal room temperature.
The big jar that you have, the whole SCOBY just expand to that.
Mhm. Yep, it'll go this size, yeah. There's a lady that makes kombucha SCOBY clothes. And so she makes it in like deep cookie sheets. And then she gets pieces of fabric that way. I always thought it'd be really cool to make a pattern so it would cut out my eyes and my nose so then I could have little facials. It's acidic, right? So it should burn off the top layer of your skin. It's really fun. Science.
Do you just
Yeah.
cover with a blanket?
Sorry?
Can you cover with a blanket inside it?
Cover it with a blanket? Yeah. Because we want the kombucha to be balanced and happy, it needs the exposure to oxygen. And so the 1 gallon jar is a nice example. You want it to be at least half as wide as it is tall. There's actually, if it was a little squatter, it'd be actually ideal for the bacteria and everything. You could do kombucha in here, but you're only getting that much oxygen, right? And so that changes the proportion. You're going to get more yeast, which then is going to make more alcohol, and it's kind of like not really kombucha at that point. So in the winter, you can cover it with a blanket, but it's going to be getting less oxygen. So your scobies sometimes turn out a little funny, a little more bumpy.
Keep the top open, just the sides.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Yep,
Temperature warmer.
yep.
Is it sunlight doesn't matter? Like, it's better to keep it in a darker place, or does it matter?
The sunlight doesn't matter. Yeah, as long as it's not overheating it, it's not going to hurt the SCOBY.
So the
Yep.
same kind of with the bottles that you use,
Yep.
can you have dark colored bottles?
Yes. So some people have said over the years that we want to have amber bottles or the green ones because we don't want the exposure. Well, once I make it, I put it in the fridge and the light's off in there. So the clear is fine. I know this glass is recyclable. In some places, the amber glass and the green glass is actually just getting tossed. So that's kind of why I went with the clear ones.
Yeah, so when you get your baby scobies
Yep.
and you want to store them,
Yep.
how do you do that?
That's easy. As long as you've got an extra jar.
Uh-huh.
What I always say is you take your SCOBY and at least a liter of fluid, so it's got a good amount of fluid on top of it. Put it in the jar. You can close the lid. You can even, for storage, you can use like the plastic lid. Close it up and put it in a spot where you're just going to leave it alone. Room temperature is fine. I've had a few people recently asking about putting in the fridge. It's fine to be refrigerated for short periods of time. Mine kind of take a little rest in the fridge, but they're sealed. There's bacteria and molds and all sorts of things in our fridges. Like, who gets in there and cleans it as much as we should, right? And if it's open, now you got a slower SCOBY with open to all those molds in there. So I don't suggest people do that. If it's sitting in your closet and tucked away, it's still brewing. Check it every month, and if it's starting to dehydrate, just add in a little bit more sweet tea.
Okay, so you can store it in the tea or the kombucha?
In the kombucha.
Okay.
Yeah, but like when, let's say if I left this for 3 months, it would start to evaporate a bit. The new SCOBY is going to be really thick. Then just put in cool sweet tea.
Okay.
Just give it a little feed.
So how long would your mother's SCOBY last?
Almost indefinitely.
Okay.
How long were you using yours?
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. Eventually, they just kind of get ratty, and it's time to give them retirement.
How long do you store, or you have to add a little bit if you want to go with
Depends on how hot the house is. In the summer and the winter, that sort of thing. That's why I would say leave a liter, and then if you forget for a couple of months, you'll be fine. But I've done it where you come back and it's a poor little dehydrated thing. And you can get them back, but it's a lot of work.
Every time you do a new batch,
Yep.
are you rewashing the big jar?
The regular jar,
Yeah.
again, because it's acidic, I just give it a good rinse.
Yeah.
Every 2-3 times. The dead yeast begins to build up on the bottom, but we want a certain amount of the yeast because we want the carbonation. Officially, you take it, wash it, and sanitize it every time. Practicality, I pour it out and I start a new batch right away. So really nothing's changed, it's just more tea has been added. Any other questions? I went really fast, I'm sorry. Often people ask how much kombucha they can drink, but pretty well everybody's been drinking it here. If you're handing it out to friends and family and they have digestive issues and that sort of thing, make sure they understand. Just take a couple ounces the first day, just in case. If they have a really bad microbiome, they're going to get diarrhea. They're going to get gassy and farty and all that sort of stuff. It's actually a good sign because then we found it's the right bacteria and yeast that they need in their body. So they're actually they're changing their microbiome. But it's not a lot of fun. Yeah. There's been some talks over the years where the caffeine diminishes or it eats the caffeine. No, the caffeine is still there. It's arguable whether or not the caffeine, the bacteria and yeast need the caffeine. Some people do decaf tea. But again, you're diluting it so much, right? I've made a reasonably strong tea, diluted it, and then I'm going to dilute it again in the second ferment. So it's nothing like having a coffee or even just a plain cup of tea.
Safe for children?
Depends on how you feel about the alcohol. Yeah.
Since I use it to my granddaughter and take about some stomach, she actually calls it.
Oh yeah.
Excuse her up when she asks for.
Yeah. I personally have no trouble, no issues giving a little, when your kid's crying at night, you give them a little something, but not everybody is that way. So generally, if you make a plain kombucha, it'll have the same alcohol in it as a non-alcoholic beer. Depending on which fruit juice you put in, it might be a little bit more after the second ferment. But the same thing for the pregnancy. The fetal alcohol people are saying absolutely no alcohol at all for pregnancy now, and so you probably want to avoid it. Anybody else? We all know everything about kombucha.
Do you have to add the sugar again every time you make a new batch? You go through that whole tea to sugar proportion?
Mm-hmm.
And started, and then you're just putting in your existing SCOBY into the new liquid.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yeah. So you want to save about 2 cups of finished, the SCOBY, and then that'll introduce the bacteria and get the pH down. And then you're just making a portion of sweet tea, something for it to eat. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
There's 2 cups.
You can buy a new starter kit every time if you want. And the minimum proportion would be 10% of finished kombucha. So if you want to get making bigger ones, you just need more starter to make sure the pH is down.
With that kit there, how many bottles would you get? Was your two-
So it's just probably 2 liters, 2 cups. Yeah, just over 2 liters. Yeah. So they come in the 1 liter bottles, the 500 ml bottles. It depends on whether you want 5 different flavors this time or do it all the same.
So are there different SCOBYs for like the black tea and the green tea?
No.
All the same?
It's the same SCOBY. I did a gunpowder green tea one time. It makes a wonderful kombucha. Didn't really think about it. Used the SCOBY and the starter in the next one. I'm like, oh, I got a little bit of gunpowder green in the next batch. So it was actually kind of pleasant. So it does take a little while for it to wash out. Sometimes I make a ribose hibiscus one, and the SCOBY turns out with this really pleasant color of pink. And again, that flavor will linger for a couple of batches, and then eventually it goes away. So, hi.
So when you were saying if you gave this kombucha to someone and you give them about an ounce,
Yep.
does that turn out to be the same kind of kombucha like that you buy in the store? Like, or is this more condensed?
Kind of touches on how I was talking about commercial, because we don't know what they've done, right? Some of them are filtering like crazy. Some of them are diluting. There's certain companies in town that I think they make kombucha and then dilute it down like crazy.
Or is there anything you know of that are similar to, like, let's say you just didn't have time to make it, but you wanted to drink some? Is there a special brand that you would say these guys I trust?
Yeah, I would probably, if you're looking for a stomach tonic, I would go with the GTs. They're GTs, the one that's at Costco. Really, it's really quite sour and strong. Yeah. Yeah, and I think I've seen some people making gut shots out of kombucha as well. So just, you can save some and take it all the way to vinegar and just take an ounce of it in the morning, just a health tonic. Yeah. Lots of fun. It's okay.
I read an article that said that, a teaspoon of sauerkraut reduces about half a trillion.
Yep.
Probiotic.
Yep.
So do you have a sense of the density of probiotics in kombucha? Is that possible?
Yeah. Yeah. Different probiotics for sure. I guess that's the part I didn't touch on. So in kombucha, why people find that they have a sip, they start drinking it, they start feeling good. It's generally the vitamin Bs. There's a little bit of vitamin B in there. If you're vitamin D deficient, that's like, oh, I feel good. It's partially that the plumbing's working well, right? The probiotics and all that are flushing out the gut. We're trying to get a bit more probiotics in there. There's something in around 200 different strains of bacteria and yeast in there, and they're live, and they're working in synchronicity. And then the other things, most people brew about 7 to 14 days, but if you can leave some for 28 days, then you're producing organic acids, glucuronic acids, and those are the things that we know that are detoxing our livers. So when you're doing a strong kombucha and you're taking it as a tonic every day, you're getting a little bit of detox over time. And then people just find they have so much more energy and everything's just going better. I've had some people where they've got, some stomach issues and whatever, and they incorporate it a little slowly, and maybe some sauerkraut and stuff as well, and they come off their meds. So it can happen. I can't say that that's what you're supposed to do, but there's no harm in having some sauerkraut, some kombucha. For me, the kombucha is really just a gateway drug for me to get everybody into, okay, you had some kombucha, how about try some sauerkraut or some kimchi, or then we can get into some really fun stuff. Like we haven't, as a scientific community, they haven't decided what bacteria they're supposed to be in our microbiome. It's going to come in the next 20, 30 years, I hope. There's lots of people that are patenting certain strains, they name it after themselves for, oh my God, like $40 a month.
Would you tell us a little bit about the history of kombucha for those who maybe didn't look at your website
Sure.
and that it's Japanese and how good fermentation?
Well, maybe you know more than I do.
I'm sitting down.
Most references are confused at how it started. It logically makes sense that, China, Japan, they were drinking tea. Somebody left it out. This weird film was on it, and they drank it anyway. Probably because it was fizzy and it had alcohol in it. Because there's something about carbonation that really, really attracts us. If you look back, my examples are more like mead and ale. That was the only way that we could preserve water, to make sure it was safe. There could be, it's not like today, but if you drank river water and had the shisto whatever's in it, but if you made it into ale, then it was safe. And those people, they drank a really light beer or ale or mead all the time. That was their normal thing. So there's something about fermentation and those bubbles that really, really draws us, and there's a reason for it.
Carbonation is not good for your bones, so how is this different from carbonation?
Oh, from the CO2 forced carbonation? So if you notice in a kombucha that's naturally carbonated, and some of the manufacturers do it and some of them don't, the forced carbonation, sometimes it's nitrogen, sometimes it's CO2, the bubbles are bigger and they kind of bite you back. That's the part I like about Coca-Cola is it just burns, right? In a kombucha, the bubbles are tiny and champagne and they kind of tickle. So it's a different gas that's being formed.
It doesn't affect your bones.
I'd have to do a study to know for sure. But it's not the same process as a forced carbonation for sure.
It's the phosphorus, that's the phosphorus plus.
Ah, there we go. So phosphorus in the carbonation process? Okay. See, I didn't even know that one. Oh, sorry. He's saying that he read someplace that part of the industrial carbonation, there's a phosphorus that's used, and the phosphorus is blocking the calcium from getting redeposited. Yeah, which, again, science makes sense. It's a plausible explanation of the issue. Yes?
I'm just interested, is it possible to start a SCOBY from scratch, or do you have to
Completely.
clone it from somebody?
No. This is the traditional way to pass it to a friend. But if you've got a kombucha that you are confident that you're happy with what their bacteria and yeast is, just leave it out. Just cover it up so that nobody can get in, the fruit license, whatever. Eventually the SCOBY will form. As the commercial brewers were starting up in Calgary, I would go buy a bottle, and some of them don't grow very nice SCOBYs. Some of them don't grow SCOBYs at all, right? So has it been heat treated? Has it been altered? Has it been diluted? I don't know. But yeah, if you have a source where, go ahead. It takes about, kombucha, most of the time you'll get a decent SCOBY on your first and second batches, but it's going to get thicker, denser if you just leave it be. So if you've got a month to experiment, just get a bottle of GTs, pour it into a jar, and you'll have a SCOBY in probably 14 to 21 days. Yeah, it's all about quality. So along the way, my science brain, we learned all the balancing of the yeast and the bacteria. If you've got too much yeast, you're getting great carbonation, but no SCOBY. If you're getting a really thick, dense SCOBY, likely you're not getting any carbonation. It's just something the way they work together. in perfect combination. You want to get half carbonation, you want that SCOBY to be forming, you want that SCOBY to be as smooth as possible. Though SCOBY's not always smooth, sometimes you'll get bumps, especially if there's temperature fluctuations in the house. It doesn't mean that it's poisonous, you're going to die or whatever. It just means that the balance is out a little bit, and you just need to help it out a bit. Mold. So if you want to, everybody's worried about mold. But again, if you followed the proportions, your pH is under 4.5. It shouldn't be an issue at all. The people I see getting mold is they're brewing at like 18 degrees, so it's really cold. The kombucha is really slow, and it just can't keep up to the exposure. Or they've introduced mold from a utensil, or maybe off their hands or something. And mold will always be on the top. It'll be fuzzy like it is on cheese, generally gray, green. Shouldn't be black, definitely. But any mold, unless you're going to send it off for identification, it's just best to throw the whole thing away and get a new SCOBY from somebody else. You just don't know. And molds, they do these things where you see the mold on the top of the cheese, and then you cut it off, and then like 2 days later you got mold again. It's because it's worked its way in between the cells where you can't see it visually. And the same thing, you're just worried that you're going to introduce something. So just toss it. There's plenty of SCOBY to go around.
Candied ginger, could you put the candied ginger in it since it has sugar on it?
Yeah.
Or does it have sulfates on it?
Depends on the candied ginger that you buy. I've done batches that way. To me, it never turns out that it has enough sugar for the carbonation that I want. But you can totally, if you wanted ginger, everybody loves the ginger one, unless you really hate ginger. But you can just use ginger root, as I was saying before, without any sugar, but you seal it and you leave it sealed. It's going to be closer to a week at room temperature before it builds up the bubbles. If you don't like the bubbles, you solved one problem right off the bat, because you don't have to worry about it. Yeah?
What's the difference between kombucha and kefir?
Milk kefir, water kefir. So water kefir, everybody heard of water kefir before? Yeah? Kind of half and half. Water kefir, or it's also a SCOBY, we still call it because it's a symbiotic colony. So they're little tiny grains, and they live on sugar water, or some people will do coconut water. It brews quite a bit faster, which can get away from you in a hurry. I generally tell people to start with the kombucha, move up to June, because June brews in like 3 to 5 days, so now the cycle changes, so you're kind of used to the kombucha. And then if you're handling that, then go on to the water kefir, unless you can't have tea. There's some reason that you need to avoid the teas. Water kefir, you feed it just straight sugar water with the little grains. They're little tiny, they look like grains of rice, and they get little plump instead of the thing on the top. Brews for about 2 days. You put it into a bottle with a little bit of juice. That brews for a day. That builds a lot of carbonation. There's many a ceiling and many a kitchen that have been painted with water kefir. And it's much more of a soda flavor. It's quite nice, but you've got to feed it every 2 days. Occasionally you need to give it a little rest in the fridge because it just gets tired because it's just so busy all the time. Very same proportions of probiotics in it, very similar organisms.
Can you use a stainless steel or a plastic spoon in lieu of a wooden spoon? Because that seems so porous to me.
Yes.
Even though you're keeping
Making
it
it
specific.
Yeah.
With stainless steel.
The stainless steel would be fine because you can run it through the dishwasher in the sanitizing cycle. Plastic, I don't trust plastic or wood even when it's been through the sanitizing cycle. So that's why this is my June stuff, this is my kombucha stuff, this is my water kefir stuff, and everything just keeps separate. I tend to buy everybody's cultures and stuff and try them out, and there was people out of the States that I've been buying water kefir from, and they've been beautiful in the past. And this last batch I got, and I grew them, and they're growing a SCOBY on the top. So they've actually contaminated their water kefir with kombucha, and I'm like, do I tell them? Because this is their livelihood, right? And how did they, because their grains, the water kefir grains should almost be translucent, and these were opaque, and I was like, oh, I'm wondering, and sure enough, yeah. So it's easy to do. So if you're trying out everything, you need to keep your June 6 feet from your kombucha, you need to keep your kombucha 6 feet from your water kefir, and you need to keep your water kefir 6 feet away from your sauerkraut, etc., etc.
Big kitchen.
Yeah, and the water, and then if you go into the milk products, then you got to do it again. And that's just the general guideline, right? If you got different air circulation in the house, you still could contaminate one to the next. So tend to have one pet at a time.
When the SCOBY gets really thick, do you peel it and choose the top or the?
Top or the bottom?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. No. Some people, it's like, oh, they always give away the babies and they hang on to their mother. That's just our emotional attachment. Sometimes you get a whole bunch of them in your hotel and you save them, and it's like, it feels bad, but they can go in the compost. You can dehydrate them and you can make little crafts. You can put them into your smoothies. The same thing with the water kefir grains, the extra ones. Just toss them into your smoothies in the morning. It'll blend them up. You're getting that extra cellulose, which is good for our hair and our nails.
What do you use for the
The actual cellulose. Yeah, because after a while you do get too many. There's some recipes out there for dog treats. Yes, ma'am.
For in gardeners in
Yes.
the room, I blended up some of my extra scobies with water and then applied them to my hydrangeas.
And?
And they turned a beautiful emerald green color. Their blooms were really rich blue. Like
They went blue?
they loved the acidity, and yeah, they just kind of took off.
Yeah, hydrangea is fun because you can force it, if it's basic or acidic, the blue or the pink. It's the same plant, it's just the way that the soil is going. So yeah, if the next batch I'm putting into I have a garden that's on my deck. I'm going to blend up all my scobies. I'm going to pour it on so they can do its thing over the winter and get probiotics into the soil. I've actually been talking to one of the compost companies in town because we produce a lot of scobies between me and the tea place. I think it would be great into his compost. Sorry, that was way aside. Any other questions? Everybody feels like they can go home tonight and make their own kombucha?
How does kombucha compare to apple cider vinegar with other?
It's almost identical. It's a different vinegar. Yeah. So if people didn't realize, apple cider vinegar, there's a mother as well. You know, when you buy the Bragg's, there's a kind of that's the starting of like a SCOBY. I've never tried to grow a mother, but if you left it open to the air, then it should form a layer of cellulose on the top of it. If you buy a really good Italian fancy balsamic vinegar, they'll grow a SCOBY as well. It's all just magical science stuff.
Are you going to bring all the same benefit from apple cider vinegar?
I haven't actually looked to see which bacteria and yeast are in apple cider vinegar because I got plenty of kombucha at home. So I could take a look and see. I wonder if they've got as many different strains of bacteria and yeast and which ones. Probably a slightly different, like kombucha's got a couple that make it kombucha. And you know, the water kefir had 2-3 things. This is what makes it water kefir. It's probably the same thing with the apple cider vinegar. So never use apple cider vinegar in your kombucha because then you're just making a monster.
Like I take 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar every morning.
Yep.
And so that, if I was going to switch to kombucha, would you say an ounce or 2 would compare to that?
Yep. Yeah. If it's gone all the way to vinegar, you would do it equal proportions for sure. Yep. There's, you can put a little bit of spice in it. So if you want to do the cayenne pepper cleanse, you could use your kombucha vinegar to do that. It'd be lots of fun.
Can you put turmeric?
Yep. Yep. Some herbs go really well with the flavor, and some herbs don't. You're kind of more making a medicinal kind of thing because the acids are going to extract certain things out of some of the herbs and stuff. So some of it will be great, and some of it will be like, oh, that was a mistake. But it's fun. It's just, you can make anything you want. You can make it as sweet as you want. You can, you know, your mom gives you grapes that you can't use up. Then, okay, we're making grape soda this week. You know,
The powder, like not the actual turmeric root, can you just add?
oh yeah,
powder?
yeah. You can just add powder. So you can make your own superfoods beverages for sure. Yeah.
So if you could use the turmeric powder, could you use a ginger powder?
Yep. Yep. Just depends on how much carbonation you want, and yeah, it's that sugar thing. You have to make your own choices, and that's part of the fun part. So again, first 5 or 6 brews, just stick with green and black tea. Stick with the proportions until you've banked up a couple of spare scobies. Then go ahead and try that tea that you think will be great. Sometimes it turns out great. Sometimes it's a dog, and that's just how it is. But it's fun. Once you get used to using the fruit juice, so the fruit juice, it's not organic, but the best way to start is just get the Sunripe, one of the berry mixes. It's got 120 calories per cup. Then the proportions were just about perfect for making a really nice fizzy kombucha. After that, you know, you've got strawberries that are almost expired. You can blend them up. If you put them in whole, they'll be swollen and you won't be able to get them out. But you'll learn those things, right? But every fruit, depending on where it's grown in the season, is going to have more or less sugar. So then you're going to be like, oh, that was perfect. And you put in exactly the same amount of strawberries as last time, and you won't get the same results. So you'll drive yourself a little crazy.
You don't have to use organic juice. You can use any juice.
It's your body. You can do whatever you want. The organic juices are great, but you do get that sediment in the bottom. And I don't like floaties. I don't like the solids. But if you don't mind that, then it's fine. And there's a strainer in the kit too. So if you don't like the solids, some people will strain it before they bottle. Some people will strain afterwards. I find you lose a little bit of carbonation if you're straining it on the way out. But do you like the carbonation?
I do.
Yeah. What's your favorite? What's your success?
Beet. I did beets.
Beets.
Yeah.
Oh, so almost like a kvass.
Yeah.
Was it sweet though?
Yeah, a little sweet, yeah.
So you
Well,
blend up the beets?
yeah, I did. Because you mentioned,
Surface area. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just make more chaga, so I'm kind of interested to see.
Chaga?
Chaga.
Yep. Yeah, the mushrooms. And again, the acids are going to pull out certain chemicals out of superfoods.
Right.
Yeah. The one that I'm kind of in love with is blueberry lavender. And I make little tiny sachets for the lavender, and then I pull it out because if you leave it, it gets too bitter, you know. But in the blueberries is easy. You can do frozen blueberries. You can mash them. You can do whatever you want. They don't swell up, so it's annoying in the jar, and yet it's a fabulous, fabulous flavor and lots of antioxidants.
I heard you say no essential oils.
You can do it a little bit, just don't do it in the brew that you're keeping the SCOBY from.
Secondary.
Yeah, yeah.
Where'd you get lavender?
My mom and dad are in Creston, and they know the lavender lane. If you're looking for really good spices, go to Spice Road in Inglewood. They're sourcing some of the Silk Road, yes. They're sourcing some of the best stuff I've ever seen. And they had a trophy wall of stamens, the orange stuff, saffron, because they buy it in these beautiful tins. And so I'm like, can I have one of the tins? No, because those are like thousands of dollars a tin. I'm like, I just want the tin. Yeah. So I've done everything I can. I've made it as easy as possible for you. I've taken out all the risks. You just have to jump in and give it a try. Tons and tons of fun. Many, many people get addicted. Priya is nice enough to invite us to let you talk to you. Help yourselves to the wild tea samples. I work really closely with the girls, and we work on their culture. And yeah, the sodas are brand new, so you're probably some of the first people in town to see them. The kits is $35, the SCOBY's $30. I think she's got, Priya, you've got them on sale for $28. So you're saving a little bit tonight. I've got 2 continuous brewers, which I didn't really talk about. So if you're drinking so much kombucha that you just can't get enough kombucha, the larger brewer is the way to go. You've got the spigot, so it makes filling up the bottle super, super easy. Generally, the continuous brewer, you'd make a batch and then just top it up with cool sweet tea. So it's a couple of weeks getting it full, but then if you want a liter a day, you take off a liter, then you put in a liter of cool sweet tea. It's going to be ready the next day. If you take out a little bit more, it'll take 2 or 3 days to be ready. And if you're really lucky, the SCOBY that forms will kind of actually seal it, and it'll actually form some carbonation in the first brew. So for me at home, I don't do a second ferment. I just take it off the tap and drink it like champagne, because it's just light bubbles. It stays for a little while, and it's just beautiful. So yeah, so if you want the ease of the spigot, or just you're making and using a lot, the continuous brewer is really a way to go.
So you don't add fruit, or you can add your fruit for the second?
In the second ferment.
Yeah, but into that,
Into your bottles. If you can, well, it's breaking all the rules.
Okay, so I'm just
Okay.
wondering if you could skip the second bottle and add the fruit to the.
You can, yes. Yeah, that's the key. So join the newsletter list, because these are the rules, and then I teach you how to break the rules and why. So you can brew kombucha anaerobically without the oxygen. You can I can teach you how to do it with Earl Grey tea. I'll teach you how to do it with coffee. I'll teach you like all this stuff, but learn it this way first, and then we play around and have a lot of fun.